I think I figured out another of those things that I don't really like about Season 5. I know I hate to keep talking negatively about it, but it just kind of keeps coming up, especially going through with full analysis mode on. The tone is all over the place. I'm not sure if this was deliberate or not, but it feels like Season 5 in many ways, especially basically from this point to the end of the show, was about simultaneously ending stories while setting up new stories. Now, I know that complaint probably seems banal. I bet you're just listening and they're like, well, what's the problem with that? Shouldn't every story do that? But thematically, tonally speaking, it's just weirding me out the more that it's happening, because it's like the story, the overall show feels like it's finally winding down, and yet, and you know, reaching a conclusion, but then also it's also establishing stuff. It's weird. Ironically, I do have a similar complaint about Deep Space Nine, which we'll get to sometime in probably about 3 years from now. I don't know. I don't know how to properly vocalize it, but it's been bugging me for a few episodes, and I know the rest of this season is going to have pretty much that exact same issue all over the place. So, next thing I want to talk about is the CGI. For those of you not aware, they've been using more and more CGI as they've been going through this, as Foundation Imaging has been getting more and more used to what they're doing and how they're doing it, doing a good job of it. And I really like what they've done with this, and I think the shot of the Drazi city was actually really nice. So definite props there. Also, I do want to say this, as much as I have almost no notes about what happened on the Drazi homeworld, with a couple of exceptions regarding to Garibaldi, I do like what they did with the setting building of the Drazi culturally. The talk about their architecture and their past and where they've been, and you know, the ideas of tradition, all that was good stuff, just general positive. Have you noticed, though, that the Drazi are a consistent issue for intergalactic politics? I mean, you've noticed that, right? Like, obviously, the Centauri are like the big obvious problem sometimes, but we look at the Drazi, and they have consistently been a problem with their whole... How do I put this? We're one of the good guys on the surface, but we're actually pretty messed up people underneath, kind of a thing they've been going for quite a while now. I mean, it's just kind of eyebrow-raising, right? If I may be so bold, it reminds me a little bit of the Klingons. Now, I made a comment once, and it was kind of unkind, and I'm not sure I agree with it, but the comment was, there will be no true peace in the Star Trek universe until the Klingon situation is dealt with. I don't mean, like, wiping them out. I mean, the Klingons, by their nature, don't lend themselves to peace, so there has to be something to do about that. Anyways. So once again, we see that after someone asks about mental telepathic blocks and shows clear signs of having issues, Franklin assumes automatically that whatever's wrong is a personal complaint against him. Now, the weird thing is, from what I've seen, Garibaldi, like usually in fiction, when someone says, you know, I don't want you to come on this mission, there's some ulterior motive. Having re-gone through this episode with analysis mode on, I don't think Garibaldi had an ulterior motive. For once, I think he was on the level. Which is weird. And I'm not really sure what to make of that. The obvious answer is he didn't want Franklin to find out about his drinking. But as we see, his drinking isn't actually a problem yet. In fact, it is in this episode it becomes a problem. You did notice, I imagine, that when he was talking with his old friend, his confidant, the confidant pulled out a drink, and Garibaldi started to protest. And then when he was like, oh, well, I guess it really has been that long, and thus he didn't know that he quit drinking, so he goes ahead and has the drink, which leads to some problems. I want to underscore this. I really do. This mission is of 100% utmost, paramount, critical importance to galactic-level affairs. And Garibaldi knows this. I just feel like pointing out the level, the scale of Garibaldi's screw-up on this one. And let's be clear, Garibaldi screwed up on this one. Now, it is possible that things would have gone badly anyways, because, you know, the Drock, I mean, let's just be clear about it. The Drock manipulating and conniving their way through the situation might have been able to outmaneuver him one way or the other. But A, he definitely didn't help that situation, and B, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know he might have been outmaneuvered or outplayed. He just thinks he screwed up. Which leads me to something I don't get to talk about all that often. Seesaw effect, which is another lorium, and I swear I'm going to work on that page one of these days. The idea is things start to go a certain way, and because things are going that way, they go more that way. A seesaw. In other words, Garibaldi started drinking. It's not really an issue yet. But then, as a direct and literal consequence of drinking, things go south. And he feels, whether it's true or not from an armchair perspective, Garibaldi clearly feels responsible for this. Notice how defensive he got when called to task by Sheridan, because Sheridan immediately was like, well, hang on, you should have heard that. Garibaldi gets super defensive about that. So he knows, at least from his own perspective, that this is on him. And so now he's going to drink more because he screwed up. So now it's officially a problem. It's of course worthy of note that we know, that he's had issues like this in the past, but it is a good way to show it on screen, to show the deliberate effects of what having an alcoholic problem can be. It is worthy of note that at least Garibaldi's mind still works. When they're at that little private meeting with the group of them, he deduces pretty quickly that these aren't the Drazi. And he puts the pieces together very quickly. He's still the detective, so that's awesome. But it is interesting to me that their inner circle consists of Sheridan, Delenn, Garibaldi, Londo, Jacquard, and Franklin. That's the inner circle. Now, of course that's the main cast. But I mention that because after everything that's happened, they still actually consider Londo and Jacquard part of the inner circle. But they hide things from him. And my first gut reaction was, oh, come on! But no. Jacquard himself brings up the obvious, really, in hindsight, reason to keep everything from Londo. Londo would be pissed at this. Jacquard's right. Londo would be outraged by the idea that the Centauri are being used like this and abused like this. Remember, Londo already knows their military expenditures are up. Londo already knows there's plots going on back at the castle. Londo already knows that some of their fleet is just missing. Knowing about this, oh, he'd be in a fury. Especially after all the garbage that Londo had to go through in order to try and right the Centauri course and get them back where they need to be. For someone to be jeopardizing that again, oh, piss off. And then Londo's life would be in terminal danger. And so for his own sake, they keep things from him. I even like how they bring up, oh my god, Londo's our leak. And Garibaldi pretty much stomps on that immediately, says, well, yeah, not deliberately, though. Londo is not a leak. He's not a mole or a spy. He probably is just bringing this stuff up as a specific way of trying to fix it, and just happens to be talking to the wrong people. Yeah. Also, I want you to remember a line that Jacquard says, where he goes, I go. I know it's going to be hard. Just keep that line in the back of your mind for a few episodes from now, okay? So, Jacquard becomes a spiritual leader. I say spiritual very clearly, by the way. I have always made the distinction between religious and spiritual. I don't want to imply anything positive or negative about either term. From a neutral perspective, religious is organized. A religion is an organization, a political entity that happens to be involved around spiritual affairs. Spirituality, well, is more of an umbrella term dealing with the spiritual side of things, but is also not necessarily organized. One person may be deeply spiritual, but not go to church, to use an obvious example of what I'm talking about, okay? I mention this because Jacquard clearly does not want this at all. He hates this idea, the Book of Jacquard. Why are people spreading this? Why? Oh my god, hundreds of thousands of books! And of course, part of the reason why Jacquard hates this is shown on screen with the other Narn, whose name I don't remember, who pretty much treats his book as if it is already dogma. Jakar doesn't like dogma. He's cool with tradition, but he doesn't like the idea of rigid adherence, especially since what he's trying to preach is the idea of progressiveness and moving forward. In addition to that, of course, we have... Well, let's be honest, this is effectively the conclusion of Jakar's story arc. There's a bird, like, right out my window. I'm sorry, guys. Anyways, this is effectively the conclusion of Jakar's story arc. He has reached a point now where he has become a moral center, an ethical leader of the people, trying to teach and preach for them to move forward into the new era and have new concepts, new ideas, new understanding. Even a soldier, a warrior who's only fit to kill, is able to see that we need something new. We need something other than hate and violence in our lives. And again, with that gentleman and his dogma, it's shown so clearly why the Narn people really need Jakar right now. Because, I mean, I could just dissect that scene for a bit. He's like, well, you said that the Centauri are not be to trusted. Where is that? At the beginning. Of course! Because I learned and I grew from that. Yes, but the whole book must be true. Ugh, okay, put your head in the book. Now, what I love about that scene is Jakar is not stupid. As I have pointed out before, Jakar is a master of rhetoric and very diplomatically adept. And so he very quickly cuts to the heart of the matter, because what the other Narn is trying to basically counter-preach is that all Narns can be trusted, but all other races cannot be trusted. So put your damn head in the book. And I love that. They don't even show it. I mean, it would probably be with the prosthetics. They don't want to slam a book on his face. But, you know, I love that. That's your first lesson. We need to undo the old ways, because the old ways were necessary for a while, but aren't anymore. And that quote right there summarizes a lot of humanity. Jakar himself says this flat out. Evolution required us to fight and hate and kill. But there's a certain point at which that's not necessary anymore for survival. Where living is something that becomes a relative point. Where doing more or doing better becomes a thing. There's actually a lot, both philosophically and religiously and spiritually and scientifically, that has been said for a species to get to the point where they no longer need to hate and fight and kill. And it actually becomes to the point where all those instincts that helped humanity, or whatever species, to survive and thrive, actively become a detriment for them to continue thriving and surviving. There were whole studies done about this with regards to nuclear war. For decades, this was a thing. Because we had gone so far and done so much, and those same things that helped us to get to that point were capable of leading us to destroying ourselves. Now, we didn't, because you're listening to this video right now. And if you're like 50 years from now going through like a Fallout-style ruin, you can feel free to laugh at me from the future. But for now, at least, we have, at least as an overall society, started to learn the fact that, you know, the animalistic, if you will, the bestial base urges may have their place and point, but they can't be the dominant anymore. We can't actually function like we are animals. We have to function like we're people. And that is Jakar's entire message to the Narn. We have gotten to this point. Now we need to get past it. And that's the hard part. It's a nice message. Note how Franklin, by the way, to switch topics, note how Franklin, the way he convinces himself to leave his post and go take this job is because of the sheer level and scale of the good he'll be doing on a galactic level for the whole interracial medical project, which, let's be honest, is a critically important thing and something that really should have been done probably decades ago at this point. So, awesome thing for him. But it's still hesitant. He still doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to leave behind his friends or his home or his family or anything like that. And I bring it up because the scene where Franklin admits this to Sheridan is a really good scene. No music playing, just two characters acting off each other. I don't have much else to share. You know, no deep analysis. I already talked about the thematic thing. I already talked about Franklin's thing. And then, of course, we see Garibaldi with a bottle. And that brings us once again to that weird tone of stories ending while stories are being established to begin. It's weird, and I'm curious to think if it bothers any of you guys as much as it does me. Either way, I'll see you guys next time.